Welcome back. It's time for your latest industry news recap. Today, there's some pretty sad developments coming out of the Australian aviation industry with an aircraft retirement over to Air Canada, and they are boosting flights out of the nation's capital. And Alaska Airlines has launched a new route. That's where I'd like to begin. Within the last week or so, the carrier celebrating a service commencement between Seattle and Toronto Pearson International Airport. Thanks to the route commencement, Toronto is now the 6th city in Canada to be served by the company that has, in the last, say, 18 months, really focused on committing to expanding its network heavily. Alaska Airlines already serves the likes of Calgary, Vancouver, Victoria, Edmonton, and more within the country. While described as a new service to Toronto, actually, funnily enough, it is a returning city for the US-based carrier. The company says it served Toronto in the early 1990s, offering nonstop connectivity from Los Angeles to Toronto. However, after 30 years, the airline believes now is the right time to bring its service to the city back, and this time originating out of Seattle. Service is expected to operate daily with Alaska Airlines utilizing the 737-900 jets. The airline says flights are scheduled to depart Seattle at 6:50 in the morning, arriving into Toronto at 2:20 p.m. The return leg departs Toronto at 3:40 p.m. with a 5:55 p.m. arrival back into Seattle. All these times are local to their respective cities. Alaska Airlines used the launch to highlight fellow partner Porter Airlines' most recent expansion west as well. We know Porter Airlines has dipped into the Los Angeles and San Francisco markets in California, looking to increase connectivity across the West Coast. This is something Alaska Airlines does well, and the pair have come together to really broaden their mission of serving the people of North America. Over the last year, Alaska Airlines has added several new companies as global partners. They believe this to be an endeavor very much worth pursuing. The airline looks to leverage relationships with companies to boost its bookable routes for customers, which in theory, like I've discussed on numerous occasions now, should smoothen out the travel experience and provide your everyday traveler with more opportunity on how they get to their end destination. Also, all on the single ticket. Launching service between Seattle and Toronto represents another important moment for the airline as well. It highlights their ability to offer service further east from the West Coast, and as a result, many onlookers believe there's opportunity to launch into more Canadian and even US markets with time. In Canada, some definitely look towards Montreal as being an attractive option. Staying in Canada, and this time with Air Canada, well, they've unveiled plans to boost their flights to the country's capital, Ottawa, in what is being described as a long-awaited move. As part of the most recent announcement, Air Canada says it'll boost flying by almost 60%, with the capital being connected year-round to more cities than ever before. On top of that, we will see frequency increases in response to increasing demand. The flag carrier knows how important Ottawa is, not just to the country, but also to Air Canada's own network, and in response, it believes that growing capacity is an important next step in the commitment to the capital. Firstly, let's take a look at the domestic network, with a focus on improving these from cities within Canada. The airline says daily service, which resumed between Ottawa and Calgary, will now be extended year-round. Meanwhile, Ottawa and Winnipeg will also be year-round now. As of July 1, it'll boost flying between Ottawa and Halifax. Thrice weekly services will move to daily, and on top of that, Ottawa and Quebec were increased daily on May 1. Lastly, and I'd also argue one of the greater changes set to come, is in the 2 daily flights being offered between Ottawa and Vancouver. As part of route changes, one of these daily flights is now going to be operated by the Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner, so the addition of the wide body between the two cities will see a capacity boost. Don't worry though, transborder services are also going to increase, with Fort Lauderdale now seeing 6 weekly flights. This is up from your previous 4. These service decisions, alongside all other transborder flights that I mentioned, are for the winter 2024-2025 schedule. schedule. They're therefore seasonal changes. Air Canada went on to say that Ottawa to Orlando will also experience a doubling of weekly flights, with 4 services now offered, and lastly, Ottawa to Tampa will see 2 weekly flights up from the previous one. Now, while Air Canada is making the aforementioned service changes, when you consider its partner United Airlines, well, service will be increased to other locations as well. The airline highlights Chicago and Washington Dulles, which will see further frequencies combined with Air Canada's own operations. There has, yes, been a lot of focus on your transborder and also Canadian expansion from Ottawa, but there will be a focus on warm weather destinations across the 2024 winter schedule. Air Canada says it'll increase flights to the likes of Cancun, with locations served thrice weekly now increasing upwards to 4 times weekly. This represents all round a very important moment for Air Canada, putting a greater emphasis on more Canadian cities and hoping to compete with some of your existing airlines in these markets while forging their own. On to the last story, and Qantas is saying goodbye to the Boeing 767. Deja vu? Well, you'd be right. This is the second time, but this on a more permanent basis, as they retire the 767 freighter. The Australian flag carrier has had a long history utilising the 767 family to its advantage, with well over 1 billion kilometres flown across the passenger and freight fleet. From 1985 through to 2014, Qantas actually used the 767 for its passenger operations across various markets, and its capabilities proved incredibly reliable time and time again. However, when the airline retired the 767 from passenger services in favour of existing and more efficient aircraft, the 767's reign was over to a certain extent, but not fully. Qantas would go on to use the 767 freighter to its advantage for the freight division for almost a decade after, with then the progressive introduction of more efficient freighters in due course. And now, in May of 2024, the Australian flag carrier reached a point very similar to its passenger network, where the 767F is no longer required. On Saturday, May 18th, the group operated its final flight. For a considerable period, we had seen the 767F on a trans-Tasman network, where several types of cargo were transported. VHEFR is the last 767F to be retired under the Qantas name. It was first delivered in 2006 and flew for All Nippon Airways under their own cargo division before arriving with Qantas Freight under Express Freighters in 2011. It has since then served the Qantas Group. While the retirement of the Boeing 767 freighter is unfortunate for aviation enthusiasts, as it means another part of the Qantas history comes to a close, it is something we've known to be the case for some time. The airline announced plans to transition towards an all-Airbus freighter fleet now some time ago, and we have seen the persistent introduction of Airbus A321 freighters, and also most recently the important conversion of Airbus A330s into dedicated freighters. The A330 P2Fs are seen as hugely important for the international fleet, while we see the Airbus A321 freighters as being critical for the domestic fleet. All around, these aircraft are considerably younger in average age and therefore should harbour some fantastic benefits for the company in the long term. But until then, it's a chapter with the 767 that is now formally over in both passenger and freight markets. That's going to conclude today's aviation news recap. If you have any thoughts, you're more than welcome to drop it down below in the comments. Thank you very much for your support here on the channel. Take care, do be safe, and I'll see you same place, same time tomorrow for your latest industry news. And we'll fly.